Imagine this: an enemy that didn't march in with tanks or fighter jets, but with tattoos, prison scars, and a terrifying reputation. Reports are pouring in that a Venezuelan prison cartel, once locked behind concrete walls, has now stepped boldly onto American soil. Whispers say they turned a jail into their own city, complete with pools, nightclubs, and even a zoo. And now, they're bringing that same lawless empire straight to U.S. streets. The name on everyone's lips? Tren de Aragua. The so-called train that once ran through Venezuela's prisons is rumored to be storming through neighborhoods from New York to Colorado. And now, the United States appears to be striking back with a vengeance. Fans are shocked, residents are terrified, and social media is lighting up with questions. How did a cartel born inside prison walls reach Times Square? And what's really going on behind the headlines? The tension is explosive. Claims of gang members taking over apartment buildings, clashes with police officers in broad daylight, and dramatic raids that feel ripped out of a movie script. Stay with us, because this is not your ordinary news story. This is a saga of invasion, betrayal, and a fight that could change everything. There are whispers in the streets that sound like something out of a crime thriller, except this isn't a movie. It's a drama playing out across neighborhoods that never imagined they would become the backdrop to such chaos. People are saying that a Venezuelan prison cartel, born out of concrete walls and barbed wire, has slipped into American life with a swagger so brazen it feels unreal. The whispers claim these men once ruled jails where guards gave up, where inmates built pools and nightclubs, and where weapons stockpiles could rival a small army. And now, this same cartel is rumored to be knocking on the doors of ordinary families in places like Colorado, New York, and Florida. When the first stories came out, fans of true crime channels thought it was exaggeration. How could a gang that started with petty theft in Venezuela suddenly appear in Times Square, attacking police officers? But then shocking security footage began circulating online. Grainy clips showed men moving through apartment hallways, casually knocking on doors, and demanding protection money. Residents described it as living under a shadow. One woman, her voice shaking, said she was told to pay a second rent directly to strangers who carried knives. When she refused, her car windows were smashed. Emotions ran high in the community. Families terrified to even walk outside. The cartel's name alone carries weight. Tren de Aragua, which roughly means the train of Aragua. Locals say the name fits because once it starts rolling, it crushes anything in its path. The character at the center of this storm is a man called Nino Guerrero, described as cold, ruthless, and bloodthirsty. His rise began in Venezuela, where he reportedly turned a prison into his own fortress, complete with underground tunnels and even a zoo with exotic animals. Residents who lived near that prison still recall the fear in their voices as they described music blasting from behind the walls, gunfire echoing in the night, and a sense that the state had lost all control. In America, the narrative is even more shocking. Commentators say that the cartel's expansion has been anything but subtle. Unlike traditional gangs who often try to stay under the radar, Tren de Aragua seems to thrive on making its presence known. This isn't just a story of drugs or extortion, it's about domination. The gang allegedly told its members that fear was the most valuable currency, and they were ready to spend it. Fans on social media exploded when rumors surfaced that cartel members were recruiting inside migrant shelters. Some people saw it as a betrayal of vulnerable families who came seeking safety, only to find themselves pressured by violent outsiders. One viral post claimed young men were being promised quick money if they joined, while others were threatened into silence. Whether all the details are true or not, the online firestorm painted a picture of a gang that had no intention of hiding. And then came the Times Square incident. Two NYPD officers responded to what they thought was routine disorderly conduct. What unfolded left viewers speechless when cell phone clips leaked. The officers were surrounded, kicked, and beaten by a group said to be linked to Tren de Aragua. The footage replayed across news outlets, sparking outrage. Fans were shocked at how brazen the attack was, happening in one of the most crowded, visible spots in America. When it was revealed that several suspects were released without bail, emotions boiled over. The family of one of the officers spoke to reporters, their anger raw, their voices breaking as they asked how their loved one could be attacked so brutally, and yet the attackers walked. Commentators began comparing the situation to a reality TV feud where the stakes just keep rising, except this feud wasn't staged. Every twist felt heavier than the last. Whispers suggested that the gang wasn't just about street fights, but about building alliances with existing groups like MS-13. The idea of two powerful criminal forces linking arms sent shivers down the spine of communities already struggling with violence. Dramatic accounts from Texas added more fuel to the fire. A man and his 2 children were reportedly abducted, with the father executed in chilling fashion. People who heard the story couldn't stop repeating the detail that the children were spared, but left traumatized. A scene that sounded like a script written to horrify audiences. Families across America started asking themselves, if this could happen there, could it happen here too? What made the story feel like a twisted soap opera was the cartel's rumored use of grotesque intimidation tactics. Rivals allegedly received trash bags at their doorsteps, not filled with threats written on paper, but with the dismembered remains of those who had crossed the wrong line. Fans online didn't know whether to believe it, but the whispers themselves created an atmosphere thick with fear. As these claims spread, reactions from communities were deeply divided. Some believed the stories completely, sharing them across social media with captions like, "America is under siege." Others accused news outlets of sensationalizing events to push political narratives. The back-and-forth arguments felt like watching 2 sides of a family fight at the dinner table. Each side convinced they were right, each side certain the other was blind. Meanwhile, rumors of government retaliation began to swirl. The word terrorist started appearing next to Tren de Aragua's name in headlines. Suddenly, this wasn't just a gang problem, it was being described as a national security threat. A dramatic turning point came when reports surfaced that the group had been officially designated as a foreign terrorist organization. Fans were shocked at the escalation, and the family members of those who had been victimized felt a bittersweet sense of vindication. But even as authorities ramped up their rhetoric, whispers from inside communities painted a picture of a cartel not easily intimidated. Stories circulated of members mocking the idea of deportation, confident that local laws and sanctuary city policies gave them room to maneuver. One anonymous source claimed that the cartel had already ordered a green light on police officers, essentially telling members they could open fire on law enforcement without fear. Whether true or exaggerated, the claim itself was enough to push emotions higher than ever before. Friends of victims began speaking out. A young woman who lost her brother in what she believed was a cartel-linked shooting cried on camera, saying her family would never be the same. Neighbors described feeling like prisoners in their own homes. The sense of helplessness fueled heated debates about whether America had underestimated the threat. And then came the most shocking whisper yet. The United States military itself had gotten involved. Fans could hardly believe their ears when reports claimed a cartel-operated boat had been destroyed in the Caribbean. Some described it as a dramatic turning point, others as an overreaction. The split mirrored a family feud, where relatives shout over each other, unable to agree on the best path forward. In this whirlwind of accusations, denials, fear, and anger, one thing became clear. The drama was no longer confined to foreign soil. The cartel's presence, whether exaggerated or underplayed, had forced itself into America's living rooms. Every new clip, every leaked report, every emotional testimony added fuel to a fire that shows no sign of burning out anytime soon. As the whispers grew louder, what had started as scattered reports began to feel like a rolling storm. Neighborhoods that once worried about parking tickets and noisy neighbors were suddenly being linked to a foreign cartel with a reputation so violent it left even seasoned commentators stunned. The fear wasn't just about crime anymore, it was about the unknown. How deep this network really went, and how many doors they had already knocked on. In Aurora, Colorado, security footage that spread like wildfire online showed armed men walking through apartment complexes, as if they owned the buildings. They weren't running or hiding. They were strolling with casual confidence. Residents described them as ghosts who demanded money in exchange for peace, and extra rent collected not by landlords, but by strangers who enforced their own rules. Fans were horrified by the brazenness, the way these men looked directly into cameras, daring anyone to challenge them. One resident recalled how her cousin refused to pay and was later found stabbed, the message clear and merciless. What shocked people even more was how these crimes carried the same flavor as the gang's prison origins. In Venezuela, the cartel had allegedly charged inmates taxes just to stay alive. Now, on American soil, they were said to be running the same scheme in apartment buildings. It was a twisted kind of continuity, like a reality show villain bringing their old tricks to a new season. Only this time the stakes were higher, and the victims had no idea what they were up against. As families whispered about packing up and leaving, politicians took center stage. Fiery speeches described the cartel as an invading force, a new kind of threat that blurred the lines between gang crime and terrorism. The rhetoric played like a dramatic scene in a political soap opera, with leaders pointing fingers, accusing opponents of weakness, and demanding harsher measures. The public watched, divided between those who wanted immediate crackdowns and those who feared that the narrative was being exaggerated for political gain. In the middle of this storm stood the families of victims, torn apart by grief and uncertainty. One mother, clutching a framed photo of her son, sobbed as she asked why her boy had to be caught in the crossfire of battles he never chose. Another father, his voice breaking, said he had warned his daughter not to stay out late, but she insisted she was safe in her own neighborhood. Weeks later, she was gone, her life stolen in what neighbors believed was a cartel-linked attack. These raw stories struck chords with fans across the internet, who poured out support in comment sections, calling for justice, for action, for something to be done. Twists in the narrative came fast and unexpected. When reports surfaced that the cartel had possibly ordered hits on police officers, entire communities froze in disbelief. The idea that a foreign gang could brazenly put targets on law enforcement sent emotions through the roof. Police families described sleepless nights, their loved ones leaving for shifts not knowing if they would come back. One officer's wife broke down on live television, saying she never imagined her children would grow up in fear of losing their father to something like this. Fans watching from home felt the tension, as if they too were part of this unfolding drama. But the story wasn't just about violence, it was also about power struggles and betrayals. Rumors swirled of rival gangs trying to push back against Tren de Aragua, only to be met with terrifying retribution. In one chilling case, dismembered remains were reportedly delivered to a rival's doorstep, a grotesque calling card that shocked even those familiar with street violence. This level of brutality reminded people that the cartel didn't just fight for money, it fought for absolute dominance. Family drama also found its way into the story. Relatives of accused members spoke out, insisting their sons or brothers had come to America seeking a better life, only to be unfairly targeted by sensational headlines. Emotions ran high as mothers pleaded for compassion, saying their boys were caught in the wrong crowd. Meanwhile, community leaders argued back, saying denial only made the situation worse. The tension between defending loved ones and facing reality played out like a heated argument at a family gathering, each side desperate to be heard. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Reports of a U.S. military strike in the Caribbean. 11 people killed on a boat allegedly tied to the cartel sent shockwaves through media outlets. Some cheered the decisive action, calling it a long overdue response. Others questioned whether the United States had gone too far, warning of international fallout. The clash of opinions turned the story into a nationwide debate, dividing fans into camps. One side praised strength, the other side feared escalation, and both sides filled social feeds with fiery comments. Through it all, the figure of Nino Guerrero loomed like a shadow. Described as a mastermind who thrived in chaos, he became the symbol of everything people feared about the cartel. Whispers claimed he had escaped from a Venezuelan prison with hundreds of followers, disappearing into the night like a character out of a dark legend. Every time his name was mentioned, emotions spiked. For some, he was a faceless monster who had to be stopped at any cost. For others, he was proof of the state's failure, a ghost who slipped through cracks created by corruption and neglect. As the saga unfolded, ordinary people began to react in ways that showed just how much fear had taken hold. Night crawlers in New York warned visitors to hand over their belongings if approached, insisting survival was more important than pride. Families started moving away from neighborhoods rumored to be touched by cartel influence. Even schools felt the tension, with parents whispering about safety and teachers describing classrooms filled with distracted, anxious students. The ripple effects of the story went far beyond crime reports. It was reshaping the way communities lived and breathed. Commentators compared the unfolding events to a tragic play with too many characters, each driven by emotions, fear, or pride. Politicians clashed over policies, families clashed over blame, and communities clashed over what to believe. And in the middle of it all, the cartel narrative kept feeding itself. Every new rumor, every shocking video, every tearful interview adding fuel to a fire that refused to die down. What had started as a whispered rumor was now a nationwide obsession, the kind of story that people couldn't stop watching even as it unsettled them. And just when it seemed like the drama couldn't climb any higher, another twist appeared on the horizon, promising to push emotions into even more dangerous territory. The pressure cooker of fear and speculation did not ease. It only intensified. In city after city, reports emerged of strange patterns, odd behaviors, and brazen crimes that carried the cartel's fingerprint. New Yorkers whispered that the 5 boroughs had been marked by something bigger than local turf battles. Brooklyn residents said they saw mopeds racing down streets at night, phones ripped from hands, purses snatched in seconds. But the real shock came when those phones were traced not just to local pawn shops, but allegedly shipped off to Colombia to be resold, draining the victims' bank accounts in the process. Fans were stunned at the sophistication. This wasn't random crime. This felt like an organized network with an international pipeline. Meanwhile, in Queens, 2 officers narrowly survived what was described as a deliberate attack. One officer's bulletproof vest stopped a shot that might have ended his life. The other officer's family broke down on television, tears streaming as they recounted how close they came to losing him. Emotions ran high across the country, with families of law enforcement demanding justice and communities posting desperate messages online, warning each other to stay vigilant. And yet, in the middle of this chaos, another twist gripped the nation. 7 members accused of attacking police were arrested but released without bail. The decision triggered outrage like a family feud spilling out into the streets. People shouted that the justice system was broken, that dangerous men were being set free. Political figures seized on the anger, pointing fingers at opponents, accusing them of caring more about politics than public safety. Every talk show, every podcast, every social feed lit up with heated debates. The story had become more than a crime saga. It was now a cultural flashpoint tearing communities apart. Inside shelters, the drama deepened. Rumors swirled of young men being pulled into the cartel's orbit. Some said promises of money lured them in, while others whispered of threats made in the shadows. One shelter worker told reporters, her voice trembling, that she saw boys she had known since childhood suddenly vanish, only to resurface weeks later dressed differently, speaking differently, carrying themselves with the arrogance of men much older. The betrayal cut deep for families who had fled Venezuela seeking safety, only to find themselves haunted by the same shadow they had tried to escape. Emotions turned raw in one interview with a grandmother. She had sacrificed everything to bring her grandchildren to the United States. Now she feared her eldest grandson was caught in the cartel's net. Her eyes filled with tears as she begged him on camera to come home, to remember who he was. The video went viral, sparking waves of sympathy and anger online. Fans debated in comment sections, some blaming the system for failing to protect vulnerable youth, others condemning the young man for betraying his family. The twists did not stop there. In Florida, a young nursing student was murdered, and whispers connected it to cartel activity. Her classmates gathered in candlelight vigils, their grief spilling into the public eye. Her best friend, fighting tears, told cameras that she had been full of dreams, planning to heal others, only to be cut down by senseless violence. The tragedy struck a chord nationwide. Suddenly, the cartel story wasn't about faceless criminals anymore. It was about stolen futures, about families shattered and friends left behind. As if scripted by a cruel director, another shocking revelation soon surfaced. Reports claimed that cartel members were not only invading neighborhoods, but also taking over entire vacant buildings. In Texas, police raids uncovered operations running out of abandoned apartments, where traffickers had established headquarters as if they were setting up small kingdoms. The imagery was surreal, a modern echo of the prison cities they once ruled in Venezuela. Neighbors described the terror of living next door, hearing strange noises through the walls, and suspecting something dark was unfolding behind closed doors. Fans of crime dramas couldn't help but compare it to a twisted series arc, where villains keep reinventing themselves, each time more dangerous than before. And yet behind the drama was a sobering reality. Families were being torn apart, communities left divided, trust shattered. Friends accused each other of exaggerating, politicians accused each other of weakness, and the cycle of anger fed itself with no clear end in sight. Into this whirlwind stepped the U.S. military again. Reports of naval destroyers deployed in the Caribbean painted a dramatic picture. Some described it as America finally taking the gloves off. Others warned it was a dangerous escalation, one that could spark an international confrontation. Pundits argued fiercely, voices raised, emotions spilling over like a heated argument at a family reunion. Was the strike justified? Was the threat real? Or was the story being exaggerated for power and politics? No matter the answers, the drama consumed the nation. Throughout all of this, the figure of Nino Guerrero loomed larger than ever. Commentators described him as both villain and ghost, a man whose ruthlessness had become legend. Every time his name appeared, fans reacted with shock and fascination, as if hearing about a character too dark to be real. His legend fed the fire, turning the cartel story into something bigger than crime. It became myth, fear, and obsession all at once. And then came the most emotional twist yet. Families of victims began uniting, staging marches and protests. Parents carried signs with photos of children they claimed were stolen by the cartel's violence. Widows spoke of husbands lost in sudden attacks. Brothers and sisters, friends and neighbors, all joined together in a collective cry for justice. Their voices rose above the noise of political battles, reminding the nation that behind the shocking headlines were human lives, broken and bleeding. Fans watching these scenes online described feeling torn apart themselves. Some said they couldn't stop crying. Others admitted they were furious, ready to demand stronger action. The mix of grief and rage, of fear and defiance, created an emotional storm that swept across the country. And just when it felt like the nation couldn't handle another twist, rumors surfaced that the cartel was planning something even bigger, something designed to show they weren't afraid of American retaliation. The whispers were vague, but the tension they created was unbearable. What could be worse than attacks on police, murders of innocents, and international boat strikes? Fans clung to their screens, desperate for answers, bracing for the next shocking reveal in a saga that had already crossed every imaginable line. The story had already taken so many twists that audiences felt they were living inside a never-ending drama. Yet the final acts brought the most explosive moments. Whispers spread that Homeland Security had quietly confirmed over 1,000 members of the Venezuelan cartel scattered across the United States. The number itself didn't seem massive until commentators pointed out the chilling detail. Criminology studies show that 5% of offenders commit half the crime. If that math held true here, a small but vicious group could be responsible for chaos on a national scale. Fans were shocked, families unsettled, and arguments erupted online about whether this meant the problem had been underestimated all along. Meanwhile, a new kind of betrayal unfolded. Young recruits who once wore their identities proudly with tattoos were suddenly told to hide them, to blend in. Insiders claimed the cartel had adapted after realizing that markings made members easy to track. It was a bitter twist for older loyalists who had carved their allegiance into their skin, now watching newcomers slip under the radar with clean arms and blank faces. Emotions ran high in interviews with relatives who said they never knew their loved ones had joined until it was too late, until police raids and media headlines forced the truth into the open. The truth into the open. In Congress, fiery debates turned the story into a national spectacle. Representatives thundered about border threats, demanding immediate crackdowns, while others accused them of exploiting fear for political gain. The drama played out like a televised family feud, each side red-faced and unrelenting. Behind the theatrics, though, ordinary citizens watched nervously, waiting to see if words would translate into action. The twist that silenced even the loudest voices came when reports claimed the United States had invoked an ancient law, the Alien Enemies Act, to attempt mass deportations of Venezuelan men suspected of cartel ties. Families were torn apart overnight. Fathers detained, mothers left crying with children in their arms. Activists called it unjust, insisting many were innocent, caught in a dragnet of suspicion. Government officials countered that national security demanded drastic measures. Emotions reached fever pitch as courtrooms filled with desperate pleas, angry protests, and journalists jostling to capture the tears, the shouts, the accusations. In the streets, the fear was raw. Community members described hearing whispers of planned retaliations, threats that the cartel would strike back harder than ever. Night crawlers warned visitors not to resist robberies, insisting survival depended on surrender. One man, his face hidden in shadows, said he had witnessed people sliced with blades for refusing to hand over wallets. Fans online repeated his words in shock, fueling the sense of a nation under siege. And yet, for all the terror, another narrative emerged. A fightback that felt almost cinematic. Joint task forces expanded, raids multiplied, and footage showed heavily armed officers storming apartments, pulling suspects into the night. Residents lined the sidewalks, some cheering, some fearful, all caught in the swirl of emotions that only such high-stakes drama could create. Families of victims described feeling vindicated at last, saying justice was finally catching up. Others worried it was too little too late, that the cartel's roots had already sunk too deep. Then came the moment that cemented the saga in legend. Reports claimed that 3 U.S. Navy destroyers had surrounded parts of the Caribbean, sending a message of raw power. Footage of Marines deploying was broadcast. Voices of commanders declaring that America would not allow lawless groups to thrive unchecked. Fans compared it to scenes from war movies, yet here it was playing out in real life. For supporters, it was a thrilling moment of national strength. For critics, it was reckless escalation that risked dragging the country into international conflict. Emotions split sharply, families arguing across dinner tables, comment sections overflowing with heated exchanges. In Venezuela, the government responded with furious statements, promising militias and threats of resistance. Analysts scoffed, pointing out that the numbers were inflated, the forces poorly armed. But the words themselves added fuel to the drama, a defiant voice from afar daring the United States to push further. Fans couldn't look away, the tension building with every headline, every broadcast, every rumor. And still, beneath the spectacle, the human stories kept surfacing. A father in Texas buried his son after a cartel-linked execution, his voice hoarse with grief as he demanded answers. A young woman in New York showed scars on her wrists, saying she had been attacked when she refused to pay protection money. A family in Colorado packed their belongings overnight, too afraid to stay another day. These stories, raw and painful, reminded audiences that behind the sensational twists were real people, their lives shattered. By the time the final chapters unfolded, the saga had grown into something larger than crime news. It became a mirror of society's fears, a stage where politicians, families, law enforcement, and criminals all played roles in a tragedy that felt both surreal and devastatingly real. Fans described feeling addicted to every update, unable to look away even as the story darkened. They argued, they cried, they speculated, all caught in the grip of a drama that blurred the line between reality and entertainment. And then, almost poetically, whispers began that the cartel had underestimated the United States. For years, they thrived in a nation broken by corruption. But here the rules were different. Here the sleeping giant had woken up. Raids, strikes, sanctions, and designations piled up until the once unstoppable image of the cartel began to crack. Fans debated whether this was the beginning of the end or just another act in a play that refused to close its curtains. What was clear, however, was that America was no longer treating this as a local problem. It was being framed as a war, not fought with tanks across borders, but with raids in neighborhoods, battles in courtrooms, and strikes across the sea. The characters in this saga, families, officers, politicians, criminals, were locked in roles they could not easily escape. And the audience, millions watching from their homes, remained glued to the unfolding spectacle, waiting breathlessly for the next shocking revelation. The most feared Venezuelan prison cartel had dared to step onto American soil. What followed was not silence, but the roar of a nation striking back, promising that the train of Aragua would not roll unchallenged. And yet, even as voices of defiance rose, questions lingered in the air, questions that fans debated late into the night. Had the cartel already planted seeds too deep to be uprooted? Could alliances with other gangs reignite the cycle of violence? Or had the United States truly begun the process of hunting down an enemy that thought itself untouchable? And so the saga circles back to the question everyone is whispering: what happens now? The Venezuelan prison cartel that once built discos and zoos inside jail walls dared to extend its reach into American neighborhoods. It left families broken, officers scarred, and communities divided. But it also awoke something bigger, an American response that grew louder, sharper, and more determined with every passing day. Fans are still reeling from the shocking twists, from Times Square brawls to Caribbean strikes, from families crying on television to political leaders clashing like rivals on a reality stage. Emotions ran high, accusations flew, and alliances were tested. The story felt less like news and more like a high-stakes drama with no clear ending. And that's because it isn't finished yet. The cartel may have underestimated what happens when you bring fear to the doorstep of a nation that refuses to bow. But questions remain. Can the United States truly dismantle a network that thrived on chaos for years? Will alliances with other gangs give the cartel new life? Or has the countdown to their final downfall already begun? One thing is certain. Audiences across the country are watching, waiting, and demanding answers. The families want justice, the fans want closure, and the nation wants reassurance that safety will return to its streets. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Will the cartel's train derail under the weight of American retaliation, or will it find a way to rise again? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with friends who need to hear the story, and subscribe so you never miss the next shocking twist. Stay tuned, because in a drama this big, every voice counts, including yours.